This is Bob Harris from the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. The weather is very grey and cold at the moment. In actual fact, the weather forecast is that we will not get sun in Stockholm for the whole of December. So what better on a cold and dark day to get sunlight into your life, and how better to spend the day than with Neurotech2040. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to this session, and we're going to talk about the content of Work Package 3. But before we do that, let's just set the scene a little. It's becoming increasingly challenging in our worlds of universities, where we conduct teaching and we conduct research. There are more people wanting to come into higher education, more people wanting to come into doctoral training than ever before throughout the world. That means there's more competition. We know that research is being conducted all over the world as well, and it's becoming more competitive. And countries which don't have long histories are catching up very, very fast. So modern research training would benefit from collaboration. And that's exactly what European universities are all about. And here we have a fantastic opportunity in the field of neuroscience to do something. So greetings from Stockholm. Now I'm going to start showing a short presentation here. So we're going to be talking about Work Package 3. Yeah. So we're going to be the think tank of the whole consortium, and that's really then the fun thing. What I was going to show you in my next picture was a crystal ball, and what our job is to then take our crystal ball and try and look into the future. What will be there, not only 20 years time in 2040, but also extended in time past that, and what will be societal needs, what will be important in the fields of innovation within neuroscience, in teaching, and what will be the state of research, what will be the state of healthcare, and so on. So it's a fun work package because there's going to be no right or wrong. We don't know what the future is going to look like. We don't know how society will be. We don't know how European policies will be, and so on. So you can click on 2 slides. If you could. Yeah, so there we have. So this is what we're doing, the crystal ball. Okay, if we go on to the next slide. So we're thinking then of looking forward 20 years into the future. But what better place to start looking into the future than actually looking back in the past? And we already had a nice lecture from Zoltan, but I'll try and give you some inspiration from things which inspire me from the past, at least. And we go back not 400 years as Zoltan did, but we go back just maybe 100 years or so. So we click the next picture and 1 click. So in the field of neurosurgery, if we're talking about technical innovations, then you needed brain surgery at the end of the 1890s. Then these were the instruments that were being used, making holes like carpenters' instruments and the like. Fast forward to 2020, then we have something called the extraducer. This is a novel intraarterial catheter, which has been actually developed here at the Karolinska Hospital and Karolinska Institute by colleagues of mine. And this will then enable access of the circulation and tissues from the circulation without causing a bleeding, and facilitate the injection of cells or chemotherapeutic agents or whatever. You can even biopsy with this extraducer. It's a wonderful medical device which has come through collaboration from Karolinska Institutet and the Royal College of Technical College, where metallurgists have come together to say, okay, this is the medical need, let's fix it. So this will be the future, where you will no longer need to use the instruments on the left, even though they're a bit more modern, for making holes in the head in order to access the brain tissue. But maybe you'll be able to use this invention on the right instead. Okay, next slide, please. If we think about imaging, then of course 100 years ago, then researchers were using apparatuses like on the left here. It's very simple, one eye use microscopes, and they would then be able to take tissues, take biopsies, make some sort of sections. They don't have the wonderful microtomes that we have nowadays, but fast forward to 2020, and we have machines like imaging machines like the PET camera that you see. We have PET, we have MRI, we have SPECT, we have MEG, we have a whole range, or we have live imaging that we can do to follow cells even trafficking into the brain. So we have a wealth of instruments that enable us unprecedentedly to look into the nervous system like we never could before. So wonderful future. But what will the next 40 years or the next 100 years be? If we click to the next slide. And the images that we get, here you see on the left, this is Santiago Ramon de Cajal, who was the forerunner, if you go back one. Yeah. So these are pictures he took, that he drew by hand of his observations using one of these simple microscopes. And these are depicting oligodendrocytes, astrocytes, nerve cells. It's a wonderful art history. I recommend you look up his work on the internet. And that's what was being done 100 years ago. And then in the middle, we have an image that you get from the PET camera, which I showed you. This is early Parkinson's disease, which we now have then fantastic PET tracers to be able to investigate the distribution of certain molecules. And on the right, we see then a wonderful picture of connectivity. It's all the nerves connections in the brain using these fantastic techniques. We have clarity, a way of processing tissue. So technically, we can do things, we can produce images that wouldn't even been dreamed of 100 years ago. And now we have to think about what we're going to dream of in the next 40 years. Next picture, please. But what about the people? It's not only the technologies. What about the people? And who will be the innovators of the future? Will it be people within our consortium? Will it be our students that we're training at all three levels of education? Who will be the next person to win the Nobel Prize? Here is one of my favorites, this rather stern-looking Austrian. This is Julius van Jarek, who was a psychiatrist who was heading the neurology clinic in Vienna at the turn of the century. And he got the Nobel Prize in 1927, the first psychiatrist ever to do so, for something called fever therapy. He was trying to treat patients who had neurosyphilis, dementia paralytica, where people basically went crazy, and there was no cure for that disease. You just ended up your life in an asylum. At the same time, he had the soldiers coming back from the wars in Africa with malaria. And as a scientist, he realized that whatever the organism was that was causing the neurosyphilis, it was sensitive to heat. So he did an unprecedented experiment, which you'd never be able to get past the regulators today. But he took blood from a soldier with malaria and then put it directly into a patient with neurosyphilis. The neurosyphilis patient got a mild fever, several bouts, which you could then treat with quinine to get rid of malaria, and the process of the dementia paralytica was stopped. It wasn't cured, but it wasn't stopped. And this fever therapy was used up until 1954, after which antibiotics could be used to treat it. So a wonderful potential, and maybe it actually illustrates nowadays not being able to do this type of experiment for all the right reasons, but the regulations, would that be actually one of our challenges within the neuroscience field? And how about the vision scientifically as scientists? This is Pio del Rio Ortega, who was another South European scientist who worked with the cells that you can see on the right there, these wonderful ramified cells, which are microglia, the subject of my own research. And way back in 1932, Pio wrote down these 9 points saying what he thought these cells would be doing and how they would be doing. Then you can see that only one of these 9 hypotheses that he had for the future, and this will be that there will be very little variation in these cells, has proven to be incorrect. Everything else that he said almost 90 years ago, and we're only starting to prove that he was right. He was right. How will we think about what predictions will we make for the next 90 years in advance? That's the whole point of this work package. Next slide, please. And this is just showing what modern data would do to show that he was wrong in just this aspect. This is transcriptomic RNA-seq data in a very interesting publication definitively showing that these cells actually are subpopulations that have different characteristics. And we know that they change both in time during development and in space. So we have the most amazing omics techniques to be able to address questions that Pierre would never have ever been able to think that he would be able to see happen. But at the same time, he had the vision and the foresight, the inspiration to think ahead. And that's exactly what we have to do now. And what about society? What will society say to us? You know, medical advances have been enormous in the last 50 years. We can cure certain forms of cancer, which were unheard of before, especially childhood cancers, leukemias. Now, CAR T-cell therapy, we can cure people that would have died within 10 years of age. We can treat many metabolic diseases. Diabetes is a treatable disease, even though it's still the most expensive disease in the world. We can do triple organ transplantations, and people have a very good chance of surviving. But what's the last frontier in medical science? It's neurodegenerative diseases. We have nothing for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Huntington's, chronic MS, glioma brain tumors. And the predictions are that these conditions, now that we have an increasingly aging population, will increase with time as well. This is just data showing what the predictions for the numbers of people with dementia will be in the future. So we know that within the next 20 years, there'll be a fantastic burden, both on healthcare systems and also in the aspect, the context of dementias on people, on the carers. And that will be an enormous burden on society. So we need to try and predict, well, what's going to happen within the next 20 years in this respect as well. What will society's needs be? What can we predict will be the new challenges in society? Next slide, please. So if you think of Neurotech2040, our consortium as a body, then I'd like to think that our work package 3 is the brain, not because it's controlling everything else, but because it's going to be receiving information and interacting with all the other work packages. I just show 3 of them here. So we'll be feeding in and working very closely throughout the whole consortium to put input into this crystal ball where we can try and see where we are at the moment and where we think we're going to be. And that will be the work for work package 3. Next slide. And what better way to start the work package? We haven't had a meeting yet. And the reason we haven't had a meeting is that this is our first meeting. And not just for the representatives from the partner universities that are part of work package 3, but all of you. We have over 1,000 people here. And what we want is to use you now in the first communal effort. There is strength in numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to organize 8 breakout sessions. There are separate links to these sessions. These are the topics with the partner universities who will be hosting them. We will have 1.5 hours maximum. So we have these eight breakout groups. And what we want you to do now is to work together. In each of the groups, each of the breakout groups, you have these different themes. So you choose the theme that you want to join and you link in there. There'll be a host who will lead the discussion, and we have up to 1.5 hours. We put a lot of time here for you so that we won't be limited by time. And we want you to take part. We want you to be inspired. We want to get the information. We want to be able to then come back at 15:45 to meet up, to hear how the discussions have gone, and all the information, all the interactions which you come up with in the discussions now will be the basis of how we then start to work with this work package 3. We'll record all that information and we'll distribute it among the partners so we can start the work together. So hopefully you're as excited as I am about doing this together. You were thinking you might just have to turn up today to listen. Now we want you to work. But we work together, and hopefully it's going to be really, really fun. So I hopefully you've already thought of a session that you want to join. I think it would be possible to go out of sessions and go into new ones as long as you use the right links. But let's make it as interactive and as effective as possible. And we meet back then again in 1.5 hours.